Добрый день, рада приветствовать участников
Good day, dear
зрителей и средства
participants
массовой
and
информации
the
на
media,
сессии «Роль международной кооперации в Арктике.
to our
Критерии экономической
international
деятельности
cooperation
и
in the
защита
Arctic
окружающей
session,
среды» в рамках третьего Северного форума по устойчивому
conference
развитию.
of
Наша сессия проходит в модном
third
сейчас гибридном формате.
NSDF. Our
Часть
session
участников
is on
очно со
a
мной в студии
fashionable
Саха-Медиа,
hybrid.
а часть
Uh,
участников
we're held in
подключена
a
к нам
hybrid way,
онлайн. И я с удовольствием
half
представляю
participants
тех,
online,
кто будет обсуждать с
half of
нами
them
сегодня
offline.
международную кооперацию в Арктике. Итак,
So
сегодня в
today
студии у нас
we have
Сагитов Расих Кадимович, генеральный
Sagitov
секретарь
Rasik
Евразийского регионального отделения
Kazimovic,
Всемирной организации Объединенные города и городские
United
среды,
Cities Local
и
Authorities
Вашукова
General
Марина
Secretary,
Васильевна, исполнительный директор
Вашукова Marina
Геоглобального
Vasilyevna,
договора ООН в
Global
России.
Agreement
С нами на
Directors
связи онлайн
Association,
Епифанова Ольга Николаевна, член комитета
Epifanova
по
Olga
международным делам
Nikolaevna,
Совета Федерации и
Public-Private
председатель
Partnership
Ассоциации торгово-промышленной палаты
Association
территорий и
member,
зоны Арктики. Коростелев Дмитрий Анатольевич,
Korostylov
президент
Dmitry
торгово-промышленной
Anatolyevich,
палаты
President
Камчатского
of
края,
PPP Association of
Липина
Kamchatsky
Светлана
Krai,
Артуровна, заместитель
Lipina
председателя Совета
Svetlana
по изучению
Arturovna,
производительных свойств
Deputy
всероссийской
Chair of
академии
Productive
научно-торговой
Forces
и
Research of
экономического
Trade
развития
Ministry
России,
of Russia,
Рязанова Наталья
Ryazanova
Евгеньевна,
Natalia
заведующая
Evgenievna,
лабораторией кафедры
Deputy
международных комплексных проблем
Chair of
природопользования и
Laboratory
экологии
of
МГИМО.
International Complex
И
Problem of Land
Соляков Олег
Use,
Владимирович,
and
эксперт-руководитель
Solekov
рабочей
Oleg
группы Арктического
Vladimirovich,
совета
Chair
по
of
развитию природопользования в
SDWG
Арктике.
Working Group.
Еще раз поблагодарю всех, кто к нам присоединился.
Again, I thank
И
everyone
давайте
here.
перейдем непосредственно к теме нашей встречи.
So let's move on to the
Арктика
topic
представляет огромный
of
интерес для всех
our
государств, которые так или иначе
session.
связаны с
Arctic
регионом и
is
исторически, и
as a
географически.
central
И
interest
всех глав
of
арктических
states
государств
are
по
located
глобальным
historically or geographically in the
Благодаря
region
достижениям
because
технического
of
прогресса
global
все больше и
progress.
больше Арктика открывает
More and
свои
more Arctic opens
богатства,
up
свои
for
возможности для
research
всех государств.
and
И
land use.
на этом фоне речь о международной кооперации, о
And
сотрудничестве,
here,
она все чаще и чаще заходит
more and
и
more
на международных
opportunities
симпозиумах, и
for
обсуждается в отдельных
international
государствах.
cooperation open up as
Особенно
well,
с учетом тех национальных
especially
стратегий, которые
knowing
есть у всех
that
государств,
all states
присутствующих в
have their
Арктике.
own
Собственно,
national
что
strategies
касается
of all
России,
Arctic
да, то
states are
необходимо
being
учитывать,
discussed.
что частью развития Арктики должно становиться традиционное природопользование,
We must remember
поддержка
that traditional land
кровно
use
коренных
must remain
коренных народов Севера, развитие
in
предпринимательской
international Arctic
деятельности. И,
cooperation,
собственно, вот по этим темам
development
я бы как раз
of
хотела попросить Ольгу
commercial
Николаевну
cooperation.
Епифанову прокомментировать, что же происходит у нас и
I
какова роль
hope
Ассоциации
we will have
торгово-промышленных палат
comments on
именно в этой сфере.
role of
Спасибо большое, Ольга
public-private
Николаевна. Вам
partnerships
слово.
in here. Epifanova Olga
Здравствуйте,
Nikolaevna.
дорогие друзья.
Dear friends,
Сердечно приветствую вас, всех участников нашей площадки, участников
all
Северного форума.
participants of
Сразу
our
хочу сказать большое
session,
спасибо главе Республики Саха-Якутия
I'd like to thank
Арсену Сергеевичу
head
Николаевичу
of
за
Sakha
приглашение
Republic
поработать
Yakutia
вместе с
for
нами,
inviting
обменяться
us
опытом, мнениями, найти новые
here
пути
to exchange
достижения и
opinions,
международного, и межрегионального
to
сотрудничества.
find new ways
Я
for
постоянно участник всех
cooperation.
мероприятий, связанных с устойчивым развитием российской
I
Арктики.
attend all
И в свое
events
время,
on
будучи
Arctic
заместителем
cooperation,
председателя
and when I
Государственной
was
Госдумы, была в президиуме
deputy
Госкомиссии по Арктике,
on
также возглавляла
State
экспертный
Commission of
совет
the
по
Arctic,
вопросам законодательного обеспечения
I
развития
worked
районов
on
Крайнего
Arctic
Севера, Дальнего
legislation
Востока и Южной зоны
development
России. Принимала
of
самое
Russia.
непосредственное участие в
I
разработке и
took
принятии
direct
федерального
part
закона о государственной
in
поддержке предпринимательской
drafting of federal
деятельности в регионе.
legislations over the
А
Arctic.
сейчас, будучи
And right
сенатором,
now,
состою в Совете по
I am
вопросам развития
senator,
Дальнего Востока, Арктики
and
и
I work
Арктики,
on
который
development of
возглавляет
the Far East and the
зампредседателя
Arctic,
Совета Федерации Галина Николаевна Карелова.
led by
Хочу
Korelova
особо
Galina
отметить, что Совет
Nikolaevna, the
Федерации,
senator.
лично ее председатель Валентина Ивановна Матвиенко уделяет вопросам освоения арктических
Russian
территорий
Senate pays
приоритетное
extreme
значение.
attention to
В конце
development of the
прошлого года
Arctic.
совместно с Торгово-промышленной палатой Российской Федерации
Together
была создана
with
Ассоциация
Russian
торгово-промышленных
Public-Private
палат
Partnership
арктических
Chamber.
территорий, меня выбрали ее председателем.
Um,
Поэтому сегодня я
we
выступаю
had a
и от
session
Совета
where I was
Федерации, в том
elected
числе
as a
от
chair,
Международного комитета, членом которого являюсь, и от Республики Коми, которую я представляю в
and
Сенате, и от
also I
Ассоциации
represent
торгово-промышленных
Komi
палат.
Republic in the Senate.
Повестка достижения цели устойчивого устойчивого развития – это ключевой
And
приоритет российского председательства в Арктическом совете и политики России в Арктике в целом. Отмечу, что 17-я
sustainable
цель
development
цели
is at the
устойчивого
core
развития
of
фонда
Russian
даст
chairmanship
международную
in the
поддержку.
Arctic Council, and we
Арктика – это
spend
общее достояние
major
человечества, и
attention on
поэтому
international
здесь
cooperation in this
открывается очень
field.
большое поле возможностей для международной кооперации.
Arctic opens
Еще в
large
самом широком
fields
смысле
available
этого
for
слова
cooperation in the
участие
Arctic,
сохранение народов Северной Арктики, их традиционных
in
правовых
partial
образов жизни, языков,
preservation of
города
traditional
– это
languages of
неотъемлемая
indigenous
часть.
peoples of the
И для нашей
North.
страны эта
It's
тема очень
it's a
актуальна. И
part
сегодня главной стратегической
of
устойчивого
their
развития
cultural
Арктики
survival.
– это
Their
усиление климатического регулирования и декарбонизация.
Also,
Это
we
новая
follow
экономика,
politics of
которая
decarbonization and strengthening of legislative control of the use of Arctic lands.
Предполагающий увеличение доли альтернативных источников энергии, изменение спроса на рынке углеводородов меняет
Changes
технологические
of
требования человечества
use of
к
oil
эксплуатированию
as
продуктов.
energy
Следующий
resource for
вопрос –
21st century
возможности
opens
развития
up
малого и
new
среднего бизнеса.
opportunities for land use
Эти
in the Arctic,
возможности – одна из составляющих
and
устойчивого
also
развития. Очень важно
creates better
малочисленным
opportunities
народам
for
Севера
smaller and
Это
middle-sized
известно,
businesses.
ядром российской арктической экономики
Today,
является
at the
газовая и
core
горнодобывающая
of
компания.
Russian Arctic
Однако
economy
устойчивое
are
развитие Арктики
Russian
должно
mining
опираться не только на крупный
companies,
бизнес,
but we
но и на
understand that
традиционное
development of
законодательство.
Arctic must
Именно
also
традиционные
rely
промыслы
on
точкой роста для устойчивого развития
economics
повышения
of
уровня
traditional
жизни
land
местного
use.
населения. Поэтому одной из
We need
главных
to
целей,
raise,
работы
improve
нашей Ассоциации
life
торгово-промышленной
quality of the
палаты
indigenous peoples residing
это
locally.
добиться, чтобы коренные жители тундры могли
So
стать
we need to
полноценными экспортерами
achieve
своих
that
экологически
indigenous
чистых продуктов,
peoples
что, кстати, очень
might
уже
must
востребовано.
become exporters
Здесь
of
тоже видно.
of
Мясо
their
его очень
goods
ценное. Очень
produced.
долгое время
For
оно не было
example, reindeer
востребовано у
meat.
массового потребителя.
It wasn't
Ситуация
popular
начала
before,
меняться только в последние нескольких лет.
but
Причем
only in the
страна
last
российского
several
региона.
years
В
this
частности,
trend
Скандинавия
has
и
been
Сибирь,
changing,
они
not in
нуждаются в
Russia, in
экологически
Europe.
чистом,
Right now, reindeer
Спрос на
meat
нее
in
благодаря
Europe
такому
is extremely
функционированию
expensive.
превышает
It's an organic sort of
заполнить
food,
нишу могла бы
and
продукция наших
we
отечественных
need
оленеводов.
to
Но пока
enter
они
this
по
market
экспорту дают лишь
with
несколько поколений, в том числе наималые.
reindeer meat that Russia produces, indigenous
Для
peoples in
необходимости
Russia
соответствующей
produce.
сертификации такой продукции.
But there is still lots to do to, in terms of certification. We in Russia do not yet have an organ that would perform all necessary certification to help Russian reindeer meat to hit the European markets. Development of traditional sectors of economy must be revisited. And most importantly is to create conditions for local businesses. And big role is played by PPP Chamber of Russia, especially in terms of development of business of peoples in the Arctic. Potentials that economy of Arctic regions of Russia cannot be overestimated thanks to its sheer size and opportunities that yet to be opened. Thank you very much.
Спасибо огромное, Ольга Николаевна. Вы обозначили сразу...
Thank you very much, Olga Nikolaevna. You covered many very important topics, and I'd like to go over these topics, and I'd like to ask our participants to comment on some of the areas you covered. We have Dmitry Korostelov here, who wants to add. Can we have, please, your opinion on the role
для развития предпринимательской деятельности в арктической
of
зоне.
public-private
Что
partnership
делается, как
chambers,
делается, возможно, какие дополнительно вам нужны
chambers of
меры
commerce
поддержки,
role, that
возможности.
maybe some measures of support to the businesses.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. У нас тут на
Good
Камчатке
day,
уже
dear
добрый вечер,
colleagues.
уже
In
ближе даже
Kamchatka
к ночи.
is good evening,
Дорогие
even good
друзья,
night.
но буквально полчаса назад закончилось
Half an hour
совещание
ago,
президента Торгово-промышленной палаты России Сергея Николаевича
Chamber of Commerce of Russia's meeting has ended recently, and without any doubt, sustainable development goals, environmentality of business were on top of all discussed issues. I agree with Olga Nikolaevna's view on this problem, and Kamchatka, not being Arctic territory, will not stay aside. You know that our national goals for development is aimed at sustainable development, especially in cleaning. We perform policies on introducing waste collection, separate waste collection. I'd like to also point out that we need to add to introduce higher responsibility for large companies, and as a result of this, Kamchatkan companies are being upgraded in terms of waste regulation. They introduce newer technologies, more greener technologies.
Производство омега-3 и рекомендовал регионам использовать лучшие практики камчатского.
So we try to use best practices for Kamchatka companies.
Сбыту столь необходимого для наших детей продукта.
So we are getting support on the products that our region creates from Chamber of Commerce.
Привычек у сотрудников и клиентов компании. И вообще сегодня, я бы сказал, таким устойчивым трендом.
Today, I'd like to say that sustainable trends of business in Kamchatka is introducing newer green standards.
Таким масштабным брендом, который мы себе
under this large-scale brand of Save Kamchatka. It's long after this brand is far above Kamchatka. Everyone knows it. It's extended into Save Russia. So I am pretty sure that introducing green standards allows our companies, helps our companies to save money even. I'd like to point out another trend. Because of our work, we note that social awareness of waste problem with the citizens. You know, last year we had this environmental disaster, you know, with the Red Tide last year event. We were on top of media attention because of this catastrophe. So all the coverage of this catastrophe allowed to minimize some damage to authorities because we were transparent on our research of this problem. So right now I can say that we are ready for introducing modern monitoring techniques to monitor environmental condition that will also support Kamchatkan tourism business, which has a large potential because Kamchatka is the cleanest region for tourism in Russia. I like to see you there.
Дмитрий
Thank you.
Анатольевич, я вот хотела уточнить один момент. Вы очень
Dmitry
хорошо
Anatolyevich, I wanted
говорили на
to
тему
ask you
экологии,
about
и
one
невозможно с вами
point. You have
согласиться.
talked about
Но,
the
ну,
environment,
как бы сказать, невозможно
and
говорить об
we
экономическом
cannot
росте без
talk
роста городов.
about
Это сосредоточено
the
только
economic
на
growth
промышленности,
without the growth
производстве,
of cities where there is
Камчатке.
industries and
И вот
production, including
как
in Kamchatka.
две
And
противоположные
how
тенденции, с одной
these
стороны,
two
отток
different
коренного
tendencies,
населения
on one hand, emigration of the local people
населенных районах в
from
большие города,
smaller areas into bigger cities, can be rectified with the support of traditional economies about which Olga told previously. Are there any tools, or is this being discussed before? Yes, the authorities are trying to resolve the issue of the many centuries old issue of urbanization. And yes, there are a number of temporary buildings there which have been built for the seasonal shifts, seasonal migrants. And it is, of course, in a very bad condition at the moment. But today, Kamchatka has a goal to increase the construction rates, to build new housing, especially in the northern territories, in order to keep the population in remote areas, especially considering the fact that Kamchatka is quite large, is over 400,000 square kilometers, where there are 300,000 people, 80% of which live only in the 5% of the whole territory. So we have very sparsely populated areas which can be compared to the areas of some European countries. That is why the creation of the necessary conditions of life is our task number one. And as I can see through the state programs for the development of the Far East, there are attempts to attract the population into the Far East from other parts of Russia, and the creation of the already announced Sputnik cities can be one of those initiatives that can actually help with that. And if we look, and if we try to work on and reach the agglomeration effects, if we relying only on the population that we have in our region right now, we'll probably not be able to get proper results. Because people will probably only come to the bigger cities and then start moving into other regions of Russia. That's why I think that we need to get some ideas to attract people from the overpopulated regions of Russia. For example, creating comfortable conditions for life, increasing salaries, and so on. And the main factor, in addition to the financial cost, is the possibility for creating territories for the people to be able to self-express, to self-realize themselves. And this is how I will answer your questions. Thank you very much, Dmitry. And another topic that has already been raised during our session is the topic of our session, international cooperation. And supporting the multilateral international cooperation is the main goal of the Northern Sustainable Development Forum. And today we have Marina Vashukova, and I would like her to comment on the UN Global Compact and how it's implemented in Russia and what is it, and to tell us a bit more about it. Thank you. Dear colleagues, dear friends, and our online audience, I'm very happy to be part of this discussion because this is an opportunity for me to greet the Northern Forum. And second, because I do represent the UN Global Compact, and we consider it to be a good tool of international cooperation in the field of sustainable development. And as any other tools, it has its own features, which are connected with the fact that the UN Global Compact, first of all, involves the business into the implementation of the global sustainable development goals, especially in the climate. That is why the UN Global Compact is the international movement of responsible companies of about 13,000 companies in various countries of the world who have voluntary responsibilities in the fields of environment and anti-corruption and sustainable development. And this starts like the processes of transformation, maybe on some different levels, and then on all levels of organization and supply chains and so on the level of corporate and commercial strategies. And each year they make reports on their own progress. And I think that it is a kind of a progressive movement forward. So what are these transformations in the business? It's the expansion, an unprecedented expansion of the positive influence of business in all spheres where this business is involved. Because business is using this term is very successful at the moment. And at the same time, it's the minimization of all negative influences. And I want to say it's a new level of participation of business in changing our world, because this is a UN style, which is basically globally adopted. And the UN Global Sustainable Development Goals, they say that, yes, we need to change the world in order to create the world that we want to live in. A more inclusive world where there is no degradation of biosphere, where every human can have a good life. And if we talk about the Global Compact, its gist is that we see this transformation on the example of about 80 participants of this compact from Russia. These are one of the largest companies in Russia, also the ones which like either partially in the Arctic or fully in the Arctic, and this has two main directions. The first is the involvement. So the Global Compact involves the business into the reimagination of its own mission. So it's not only financial success and the interests of shareholders and stockholders. It is still important. We do not ask them to stop being businesses, but to become modern businesses with a responsible mindset. So the profit, it stops being the main center for which all the other tasks are subsumed. That is why the mission of the business is being resynced to share values with society. So the licenses of social and environmental, which is not set by the state, but the society and nature. So responsibility for financing, responsibility for being in the green market, and so on. So this is the new reality of businesses that follow the Global Compact. So the understanding of responsibility is also changing, and we are talking about the involvement of business into global responsibility. But this doesn't mean that the business stops being responsible on different levels, such as being responsible to their own employees and so on. It is still actual, and we are still, at the moment, we are living in this new paradigm where there's a global world, where there are no closed societies, everything is open. These are like open social systems. and all the global issues that are challenges for humanity, overproduction, overpopulation, global warming, plastic issues, microplastics, and so on. All of these issues of humanity, and so on, up to the goals of sustainable development, the 17 global goals, which includes 176 specific tasks with about 200 global indicators, and include all those issues that we have, such as the hunger and poverty and so on. They not only become the topics for business, but also practical directions for their work. That is why corporate procedures and policies are being changed, and not only on the level of declarations, but also on the level of specific principles that they start to apply. Also in the, for example, in the human rights area, gender balance, and so on. So the main thing is that this work is applied. So responsibility is moved up to the higher level of company management, such as the board of directors, CEOs, and so on. And there is an unprecedented widening of responsibility, and the topics that have been on the periphery before, like such as the charity and so on. Okay, I wanted to ask one moment. So you talked about this large specter. So on this first stage, what are the Russian companies are focusing on at the moment on this stage? Is it like the environment or something like that? Is there some statistics? Unfortunately, at present, there is mostly attention paid to the environment. Why is it unfortunately? Even though it is important, it is the unbalancing of the UN Global Compact, basically. So at PAS, basically, they were mostly working on like social sciences, supporting education, development, and so on. But right now, everyone wants to talk about the environment. It is not a bad thing, but this is, well, maybe it's fashionable now. Yes, of course. It is a mainstream at the moment. So there are so many platforms at the moment in the all around the country and in the regions that are talking about the sustainable development, and very often they have this unbalancing towards the environment. Well, maybe it's good on one side because it's being paid serious attention to this issue. And like we know at the level of government, there are criteria for the green market at the moment, the green functioning economy. And there are pilot regions such as Sakhalin and so on, which are working on this. And a small example. So I talked about involvement, and the second is competence. So in order for this global compact to become a fact of life, there are a number of programs, platforms, the accelerators, and so on regional levels, international levels. And this year in Russia, we have launched 3 international accelerators for sustainable development, gender balance on all levels of management. And as an example, what does it mean? And this can be applied in any region, in any company. So Climate Ambition Accelerator, ambition is the main word here, because this is the initiative, is called the science-based targets, and it has been launched with the Global Compact and the Worldwide Fund and the Institute of Global Resources. So what does it mean? These are the targets for reducing carbon emissions, greenhouse emissions, that define how fast this should be done, at what level, and so on. We all know that Paris Agreement has a limit to increasing the global increases of temperature, but there has been a report in 2018 who said that, yes, our goals should be even more ambitious. And this program is aimed at companies reaching clear net zero emissions by 2050. And many large companies are talking about this at the moment, including Russian companies, but there is a kind of a disbalance. So during one of the conferences, the colleagues who worked with oil said, yes, that we have these responsibilities, but our top managers who are setting these responsibilities, they will not be working on this year. But, well, during that time in 2015, there will be different managers there. That is why, in addition to responsibilities, we should have specific corporate goals. So one of the goals of these accelerators that I am trying to talk about is to disaggregate the global ways of this decarbonization and to set specific corporate goals that can be reached within the next 10 to 15 years. And there are a number of terms such as the carbon budget and so on, and I'm not going to be talking about that much. So I will just say that companies are studying within these accelerators to be able to inventorize the approaches to all the greenhouse emissions, including like carbon emissions, methane emissions, and so on. And the potential of the global warming of some of these gases can be even higher than carbon. So depending on the branch, on the industry, on the sector, it can be different because different industries have different emission levels. So they are studying to take into account these emissions, and there are different levels like a scope 1, 2, 3, when the company emissions are taken into account, or maybe other services that they are getting of the whole chain of supply and so on. And they calculate these emissions and then evaluate them, and only after that they set their corporate goals, which are approved, and only after that these companies are considered to be the ones who support these issues. It's about 1,500 companies in the world at the moment, which have about $23 trillion, with a value of $23 trillion. And in Russia, we have a few companies that have joined this, and we hope to attract even more companies with that. Thank you very much, Marina. So you basically talked about the idea that I was thinking about, that the global goals are good things, but how are they being implemented on the level of different countries, on the level of different companies, states, so that, and on the specific time frames, because we do not need to talk about only long term, but also with medium term and short term and so on. And now I want to talk about the Arctic. In May 2021, Russia became the chair of the Arctic Council, and there is a wide range of issues being looked at this. And in 2004-2006, our country initiated about 70 significant projects in the fields of economy, social science, and nature protection. And I want to ask Oleg Selekov, who was the chair of the working group of the Arctic Council for Sustainable Development, to comment on what was reached from the point of view of what Marina was talking about, how these global goals are reflected in our Arctic. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for inviting me to this venue. The Arctic Council is a unique organization which unites 8 Arctic countries, as well as monitors and permanent members. And its uniqueness is in that all the different fora where everything is being, its goals are being realized. And I represented the Sustainable Development Work Group before, and in 2019-2021, we managed to form the specific directions of our work as different work groups with the tasks that are connected with social, cultural, and healthcare directions. And within the frames of preparing to the chairmanship in the Arctic Council, I've worked on the issues and participated in preparing the main strategic documents on the order of the President in the strategy of development in the Arctic and the implementation of the unified plan. And when preparing these strategic documents, we talked and worked on specific things that would be implemented within the frames of the national interests of Russia. And using the international organization of the Arctic Council, we managed to form about 10 specific projects with specific dates and timeframes aimed at improving the social, cultural, economic, social development of the Arctic and the peoples who live there as one of the priorities of our work. And I want to say here that the sharing of experience between the member countries and estimating the best practices for children who live in the Arctic were reflected in the Children of the Arctic project. It has been going on since 2017, and this year it's going to be also updated within the programs of social economic development of the Arctic in order to provide the socio-economic basis for its implementation, to allow the children who live in the Arctic to visit warm areas of the world and travel and so on. And this has been reached through international cooperation using new technologies, and this is all being implemented within the existing project that is led by Yakutia and Northeastern Federal University. It's the digital culture of the people of the Arctic. And the evaluation of 2 types of best practices for migration in the Arctic is also developed by the Arctic University. It's the Arctic Development Index for creating in Yamal and in Murmansk of the autonomous international station that is working based on hydrogen energy and renewable energy and promotion of the solutions for energy saving and other future technologies for humans living in remote and energy isolated regions, and this is done within the international project for using hydrogen in the Arctic, and these are well-known projects. And the provision of economic development and environmental safety in the Arctic by providing the best industrial development there as well as the sea shipping lanes in the Arctic. And we are also working on developing the project of Russia in the Arctic Council for providing sustainable shipping in the Arctic. And at the moment, the documents in the project are being approved by Russian authorities and Norwegian ones. Another project is sustainable Arctic finances. So the issues of sustainability are key ones in the global agenda. And the sustainability of finances is also an important point. And without this, we cannot reach the goals of environmental regulation. So the sustainable financing in the Arctic is the proposal of Russia and is based on the best practices for financing sustainable development projects in the Arctic. And this should lead to the creation of an institution for financing the development in the Arctic. We hope that this proposal that is being discussed at the moment with the Arctic countries, as well as the permanent members, the Arctic Council will be implemented during the chairmanship of Russia in the Arctic Council. So the development of the international systems of forecasting, monitoring, and informing about the risk connected with the transmission of dangerous infections and toxic materials which are posing a danger to people who live in the member countries of the Arctic is being developed with our Finland partner within the frames of the project Biosafety in the Arctic, developing measures for reducing the negative effects on the ecosystems of the Arctic and informing about the risks connected with mass emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere are being discussed a lot on the international level, including the Arctic. And this is also being discussed within the frames of work groups that we have. And another important point is the strengthening of cooperation of research institutes, authorities, and so on for providing architectural solutions to preserving unique architectural objects, unique constructions and buildings in the Arctic in order to digitize them maybe and leave them in the digital space. And the project for preserving the architectural heritage of the Arctic is now in concluding states, and we hope that at the next plenary session this project will be adopted. So I understand that you can talk about these specific projects for a very long time. Yes, but I am ready to finish. So the last project I want to talk about is connected with the climate change. That is the consequences of permafrost melting, and this will be discussed with us as well. So I want to talk about some specific things that you asked from our colleagues. Thank you very much. However, but now we understand how wide this program is and how important it is to interconnect all these projects, because they can also be antagonistic towards each other. So the goal of their balanced development should be important as well, yes? Yes, the projects, they have different goals, but as far as because of this, they do not interconnect with each other. These projects are in different spheres: sphere of energy, economy, healthcare, environment. Yes, of course, they do have some overlap at some point. But yes, this For example, this green agenda of Russia is a step forward, but what has been done is just like a drop in the of water in the sea. But we're going to be working to reach our goals. Thank you very much. And because the topic of the environment is an important one, I want to ask Natalia Ryzanova, head of the laboratory of the Department of International Integrated Issues for Nature Use and Environment, to comment what she had heard right now from the point of view of the environment and economy. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I would like to talk about some aspects of international agreements, and I would like to say that my talk is about international initiatives and their support on a national level. Thanks to all the speakers today who have spoken today and who will speak later, and I will very shortly to talk about the oceans, biodiversity, and political will. We have plans for increasing the cargo turnover in the Northern Sea route. We have the UN decade for sea science for sustainable development. And if we look at the webpage of this project, we will see the agenda that we need to correspond with. As for biodiversity, we have a document for global prospects for biodiversity, and this document has shown that for reaching progress in the goals 14 and goal 15, as well as the goals in the field of biodiversity, we haven't reached these goals yet. And there has been a short-term plan adopted recently for reconstructing systems, and international organizations and initiatives are working on this. And a Cancun Declaration was adopted on the issues of preserving and sustainable use of biodiversity. And there is also this plan up to 2024 about the swamp areas in order to preserve the habitats of water birds. And there is also a strategic plan of UN on forests, which is also working at the moment, and there's lots of work we need to do in accordance with this. As for the development of cities, the main issue of natural fall in population, this is very characteristic not only for Russia, but also other Arctic countries. It is the reason for this is, of course, the harshness of the climate. So the goal here is either to increase the natural birth rates or to keep the population in the existing settlements. The most ambitious plans of Russia are for creating new cities in remote regions. And it will be nice to correspond our plans with the new UN programs Habitat 3 that was adopted in 2016, and the International Decade, and take into account the International Decade for Water for Sustainable Development, which is still ongoing, and we have large possibilities there. And at the report of Russia for reaching the Sustainable Development Goals, we have included there quite a lot of possible goals that we can do in order to reach these tasks. And maybe we need some kind of an additional impetus in order to be able to reach serious reforms and serious changes on all levels. And we also need to provide balance, reach balance in order to reach the goals for restoring biodiversities. And there have been new regulations for using the fish resources, food resources, and so on in the context of national food security. And it will be nice to use these principles in the Arctic regions. And we also need to include the restoration of ecosystems in politics, which should be reflected in our national policy in Russia. And we also probably need to increase the adaptive potential of Arctic ecosystems in order to reach high quality of life, not only for animals, but also for people in the Arctic. We also need new political will and mobilize the resources and conduct scientific research. And our contribution is the creation by our students at our institute of a new project. And these books that our students have prepared under this project are now being prepared for publication. And I want to remind you that the Biodiversity Convention parties members have declared the decade of UN decade for restoring ecosystems, which will last until 2030, and we will see what will Russia contribute to it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalia. And it is good to know that we have these very active young people who are active from the point of research and civil society. Okay, and I also want to thank TASS, because tomorrow our students who have initiated this publication, this work, will present their work in the Arctic Forum. Thank you very much. And I'm asking all of you to take part in this session tomorrow and to listen to what the students will say. And now I would like to give the floor to Svetlana Lipina, an economist, the polar scientist, specialist in the sphere of strategic management and spatial development, to continue the topic that Natalia Ryazanova has raised about the development of all these directions in the Arctic. Which tools are most effective in this zone at the moment? Good afternoon. I'm very happy to hear you all. Yes, in most Arctic countries, there are a number of tools and mechanisms of state support for investment projects based for creating the efficient legal base. So the main mechanisms and tools here are first of all, financing for the modernization and creation of new infrastructure, creation of new conditions for attracting specialists, employees, tax stimulation, fiscal stimulation of projects, mostly oil and gas projects, and creation of digital system of environmental monitoring, because in most of the developed countries it is already created. So let's remember that until the end of the 1960s, 50% of Alaska budget was formed through the state support program, which increased the possibility for supporting projects and implementing the fiscal policy there and the labor policy. Also in Alaska, for the first time, such a mechanism as of managing finances of the region was used as the stabilizing fund. In Norway, since 1970s, so it's very important to provide competition in the oil and gas sector, and to use local resources in oil and gas sectors, and legislation in this field existed since 1970s. And in Alaska, one of the main mechanisms for implementing the regional policy in the Arctic in Norway is the Norway Fund for Regional Development. And one of the factors of the efficiency, success of the Norwegian Arctic policy is a highly efficient system of planning and managing science. And this is very important for us, which has 3 levels: state, strategic, and design executive. As for the Danish strategy, the Arctic strategy is a stimulus for the development of the whole society and public, and it includes the issues of sea rights, safety of shipping, preserving biodiversity and animal habitats, controlling the spread of pollutants, construction of complexes for managing the shipping, and so on. In Canada, there are a number of strategic priorities, which is the implementation of sovereign rights in the north, including the rights to some part of the shelf of the Arctic Ocean, preservation of natural heritage, development of polar territories, improving the quality of life in the north, and development of infrastructure. All the Arctic countries have their own policies concerning their Arctic regions, using regulating and stimulating mechanisms which are adequate to their geographical and geopolitical location, their history, and their nature. For the development of Western Arctic countries, the industry by industry way of resolving issues is not very characteristic. They analyze the whole set, the whole integrated complex of these industries. So basically everything is taken as a whole, and the different industries are only taken as parts of them. So they use many different tools to influence them. Economic and taxation policy in Arctic regions, it differs depending on the country. There are many stimulating measures, such as decreasing taxes or increasing book taxes and so on, giving benefits or subsidies. If the economy of the country is not that big, the local communities receive more rights for using local resources. And also local government. So for this topic, I wanted to ask you to pay attention to this point that we've been talking about, because our next speaker is going to be speaking about it in more detail. Thank you very much, Svetlana Lipina, because you talk really well about the mechanism that are now present in international practice, and we would like them to be used here in Russia as well. So I want to add one thing. So the possible example for cooperation of the Arctic countries, maybe it can be work on providing the cleanliness and environmental friendliness of the Arctic Ocean, because the oceans are the thing that we have together, and that is why I propose to you to start this large initiative, international initiative, and I will help you. Thank you. I hope that the participants of this discussion heard you. And now I give the floor to our final speaker, Rasih Sagitov. Rasih, as I've already told before, is the Secretary General of the Eurasian part of the international organization, United Cities and Local Governments. And I think you have a presentation. First of all, I would like to thank the head of the Republic, Aysen Nikolaev, who is actively participating in all international processes of the Northern Forum and in the activities of the United Cities organizations, and has been the vice president of this organization for quite some time. That is why the activities of Yakutia are actually global and international, and they include not only the government of the Republic, but also cities and regions of Yakutia, and the global sustainable development goals cannot be achieved without involving local authorities. That is why I want to thank the Yakutia and the Ministry of Foreign Relations of the Republic for their global work. And I would like to thank them for organizing this important session of the Northern Forum. Arctic is a unique region on the global scale, which has lots of raw natural resources, and the issue of sustainable development of the Arctic is important both for our organization and the European branch of this organization. Our members include Arkhangelsk, Anadyr, and regions of Yakutia, such as Alenyok and Evenki regions. And this year, the Northern Sustainable Development Forum is dedicated to climate change and preservation of permafrost. This is one of the main topics, because in Russia, Arctic includes 3 million square kilometers, of which 1,600,000 square kilometers is in Yakutia. And this is the basis foundation for Yakutia to play a key role in resolving the issues of the Arctic, taking into account maybe just mathematical geographical foundation. In 2015, 176 countries of the world adopted the Paris Agreement on climate with the goal to reduce global emissions of greenhouse gases and to reduce the global temperature rise by to 1.5 degrees. Forest fires in Yakutia, they are actually speeding up the global warming. That's why no climate agenda can be realized without the active participation of Yakutia, because when we talk about climate change, first of all, we are talking about the Arctic, because there are going to be melting of the ice cap and glaciers and so on. And this is very important for Yakutia, for Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, our region. And within the Congress of our organization, we have organized this round table on the melting of ice caps. And the Eurasian branch is working in implementing the three-sided pact of our organization and the global compact of mayors of cities. And we are also developing the main strategy and roadmap that will take into account all the interests of all the sides. And in October 3, we're going to be discussing these issues, and we invite everyone who is interested in these issues to take part in it. Our organization raises the awareness of our members about the UN global goals in order to improve the quality of life of our citizens and in order to prevent disasters, natural and human-made ones. It also includes the agenda for the sustainable development up to 2030, as well as the Sendai framework for decreasing the risk of catastrophes up to 2015-2030. And the Sustainable Development Goal number 8 for supporting the economic growth and providing employment for everyone shows that economic growth should not be accompanied by the deterioration of the environment. And the efficient use of natural resources, and the goal number 13, the fighting the climate change in different countries, as well as the goal number 14 is the rational use of sea ecosystem and coastal ecosystems with the goal of preventing any negative effects on it. And we should also talk about the goal that is aimed at preserving the biodiversity and so on. And all of these issues can be resolved only if we work together, including the authorities of all levels, the population and scientists and researchers and all interested parties. And the partnership on the global scale plays an important role. So one of the goals, number 17, says that it is necessary to improve the global partnership for sustainable development by sharing resources, by sharing experience in all countries. All the 17 goals of sustainable development and the issues that they're talking about, they can be applied in the Arctic. And we think that the social economic development of cities in the Arctic of Russia needs to take into account the necessity of preserving the biodiversity of the region, environmental preservation, and preserving the traditional way of life of the indigenous people. To reach sustainable development in the Arctic, it is necessary to minimize the risk of catastrophes, including the melting of the ice caps and glaciers that will also lead to decreasing biodiversity. And this is talked about in more detail in Sendai framework. Arctic is the priority in the Arctic should be reaching of balance between the interests of the industries and sustainable development. And this can become the foundation for implementing Arctic programs for preserving biodiversity and improving the quality of life of people in this region. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I want to tell a little secret. We are going to be participating in a unique event today. And today, the representatives of 5 regions of Yakutia are going to be awarded certificates of this organization. And now I would like Rasih Sagitov to do this. So we are inviting Andreev Nikita, head of Gorny Ulus region of Yakutia. Семен Глухарев, representative of Suntar Ulus of Yakutia.
Приглашается Иванова Лена
Lena Ivanova, head of Olenyuk-Evenki National Region of Yakutia.
Приглашается
Альберт Лебедев, Deputy Head for Economics and Finances of Khangalas Ulus of Yakutia.
Приглашается Попов Петр Иванович,
Pyotr Popov, First Deputy Head of Ust-Aldan Region of Yakutia.
Спасибо огромное.
Thank you very much, Rasih Sagitov.
За столом. Собственно, у нас, к сожалению,
So we are basically out of time, but I think that we do not need concluding remarks, because what we talked about today is international cooperation, development of projects. This is long-term activities. Yes, we're taking specific steps right now, but the goals are for many years ahead. That is why we should not conclude anything at the moment. But the interim goals, interim results, we will talk about them later. Thank you very much. I was very happy to talk with you.
Спасибо, до свидания.
До свидания, коллеги.